Hello and welcome to another Pitt post-game show from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with my friend and co-host, Stephen Thompson. We're your Pitt beat writers, and we're in two different locations. I'm in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. He's in Louisville, Kentucky, as we're both covering different Pitt events this weekend. I just got done covering the game we're about to talk about, Pitt-LSU. Stephen will be covering Pitt for Louisville, Pitt football game there. But let's talk about this Pitt basketball game. We will do another episode of this for Pitt football. 74-63, Pitt beats out LSU in what was an interesting win, Stephen. I don't know how it looked on TV, but it was a different environment in a ballroom in the Greenbrier Resort in West Virginia, and them ceilings was low. I kept thinking, like, man, if Guillermo really wanted to, he could bank a three-pointer off the roof and make it go in.
Yeah, it looked a little funky from the television broadcast. It was interesting. I mean, I love this time of year. I love when you get to watch games that are, in ballrooms and in, funky gyms. Reminds you of like AAU days. I think it gets a lot of these guys back to their roots and, the bright lights of all these big arenas that these guys play in. I think it kind of, gets you back to a simpler form of basketball. So I always enjoy it. I think it was an interesting game, a little ugly at times, but I think it was a good test for Pitt, especially as they get going on a really important stretch right now.
Well, speaking on the ugly, let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly as we do for all post-game shows. I'll start with my good, Stephen. My good's Jaland Lowe. This guy got a career-high 22 points. That's coming off of getting a triple-double on Monday. And he did so in an unconventional way. He did not dominate most of this game. He dominated the second half. In the first half, he was 1 of 5, 3 points, three rebounds, 3 turnovers. He was struggling at the end of the first half. He took a technical foul because he thought he was fouled driving down for a layup. And I did think there was some contact that could have been whistled. But, it's a physical game. You got to play through it. He got frustrated. He let one ref know, then he let another ref know, and then that's when they gave him the technical. And I was wondering, okay, well, how does this young man bounce back in this moment? Does he let this become him and let this define his second half? And boy, did he not, because first possession Pitt gets, he just hits from deep and gets things going. He ignites Pitt into a 12-0 run into the second half, and he finished 22 points, 6 of 13 from the floor, which means he went 5 of 8 in the second half, 4 of 7 on 3-pointers, completely flipping around how his deep shooting had been. Also had 8 rebounds, 6 assists. There was a point there I was starting to think if he gets a few more assists, he might be in another triple-double range. But I was impressed by both the shooting, the execution, and the maturity of Jaland Lowe in the way he took over the second half of this game.
Yeah, like you pointed out, I mean, going from the end of the first half, that technical foul that gave LSU the lead actually going into halftime, and then as you pointed out on social media, he took a little bit extra time in the locker room, maybe had a conversation with someone, and then comes out and he
I actually asked him about that. He said, "Oh no, I was blowing my nose." And his mom was like, "Yeah, you were wiping all that snot on your jersey. Why did you do that?" It's a really cute moment with him and his mom, Jamela. But I'm sorry, continue.
Yeah, but he comes out in the second half and he ends up being the closer. So he goes from, first half, kind of allows LSU to take the lead with kind of an unforced error. And then he becomes the one who closes out the game with those 19 points, a lot of those big buckets that gives Pitt the separation it needed to close out this game. So a nice way to bookend that game for him and a good way for him to close out a good win for Pitt.
Absolutely. What's your good in this game?
Yeah, my good is actually the start of the halves, honestly. I mean, I thought Pitt came out with energy in there to start the first half and the second half. I mean, people are going to remember that 12-0 run that they went on to start the second half. It was actually kind of in the first 4-ish minutes, and then they hit another one of those offensive lulls that we don't love that you're going to talk about in a little bit. But in the first quarters or the first period as well, they jumped out to, lead as big as 8 by the midway point. They a lot of shots weren't falling, but I thought they were playing with energy. I thought they were rebounding and playing defense. I thought they were doing all of the little things that you got to do when the shots aren't falling. And then it's kind of later in those halves where things started to fall apart. But I think we haven't talked enough about, kind of especially that second half run. I mean, the way that you open a second half is really important just for setting the tone. It's after you come out with adjustments. And I really like the way they did that in the second half, but also, that first half, coming out with aggression and being able to build a lead on someone, despite not playing your best ball is really important too.
Agreed entirely, and that's oftentimes when you are a good team is when you're not playing your best and you're still building a lead, you're still holding teams off. I thought the defense could have been another good for me for Pitt today because they had I think 10 steals and like 6 blocks. They currently lead the ACC with 6.2 blocks per game. I think that's probably going to hold with this total they had in this game. So that was our good. Let's get to our bads. I'll start with my bad. My bad are those offensive lulls. I do think that's something that they got to figure out because better teams will capitalize on this. Like you said, that 12-0 run, that wasn't a 2-minute 12-0 run. That was the first like 7 minutes of the second half. If Pitt was able to score on offense more in the second half, that might have been a 25-0 run, and that would have demolished LSU and took them out of the game entirely. But they do end up winning. But Pitt went without a field goal from the 17:21 mark all the way until Jaland Lowe hit a 3-pointer at 10:32. That is not going to help. That is not going to win tougher games when you get into the ACC contest. Now, here's the thing: they did get free throws during that stretch. Their defense was phenomenal. That made up for it. But there were just times where I think Pitt was, Jeff Capel says likes to say, we need to play with force. I think there were times they allowed LSU to dictate their pace of play on offense. They need to not be able to not do that. They need to be able to get to their spots, hit their shots, trust they're going to hit their shots, play with confidence, and then they'll be able to make their scoring more consistent in these games and not have these lulls. If they didn't have it in this game, I think they would have blown LSU out of the water much earlier. But Wisconsin, I don't know if the finals hit yet, but they were mopping UCF when I left the arena to do this show. But Wisconsin is going to jump all over Pitt if they have these offensive lulls. So that's why it's my bad. What's your? We'll get your thoughts on why these lulls are happening.
Yeah, I thought they got kind of tired, honestly. I mean, I'm going to talk about it in a little bit, but they looked lethargic at times, and they were able to break out of those lulls when the off-ball movement was really good, when guys were cutting and moving without the ball. It was when Jaland Lowe and Ish Leggett and even Davian Dunn and Cam Corrin at times had to be playmakers one-on-one for guys that the offense really started to stall. And like you said, that the pace really started to slow down. So it's little things. It's old cliches about, moving without the basketball, being engaged even when you don't have it. You got to be locked in all the time, and Pitt let that kind of get away from them at points in this game.
Absolutely. What's your bad?
Yeah, my bad's the foul trouble that Pitt got in. It really hampered them, and it hampered them in a game where, LSU is a team that really wants to push the pace. They're a team that's deep. I think they went about 10 deep, maybe more in this game, while Pitt really only played 7 guys, and they only played 7 guys because they really had to. I mean, Davian Dunn fouls out of this game. Cam Corrin, who's had some foul trouble in the past, picked up 4 fouls. Jaland Lowe had 4 fouls, plus including a tech, Guillermo Diaz-Graham and Zach Austin each had 3 fouls. Not only did it really kill the pace of the game and kind of, bog down what Pitt was trying to do, but then it also takes important players off the floor. It means guys have to sit for longer periods of time at crucial moments. And it's tied to, I think, like I said, the lethargicness, I think they just got lazy at certain points. They just didn't rotate very, sharp on defense, and that put them in bad positions. And then they committed silly fouls on top of it. So, like I said, like I said, on offense, you've got to be locked in all the time. You have to be in position all the time if you want to avoid this, because it doesn't seem like, with Amzil Dalalik maybe still taking some time to get up to speed, with Papa Conte maybe looking like he has to do the same stuff. This team maybe isn't as deep as we once thought it was. So guys like Corrin and Zach Austin and Davian Dunn especially really got to limit the fouls, and they got to be a little bit smarter.
Agreed. Let's get to our uglies here. I want to preface this by saying that the Greenbrier Resort is very pretty. Like you walk in, it's majestic when you walk in. It's old school. It's one of the oldest resorts in the country. It's built in the 1700s. That part is very pretty. You walk in and it's kind of just, wow, you're taking a lot of this in. What I thought was ugly was just how I think that the presence of this court was handled in this game. I think there were sometimes the lighting was a bit off. There was a time that the power went out on the Pitt broadcast. After just a little bit after the game, there was some, I think, some technicalities or technical issues that kind of befell the situation. Now, again, I think the intimate environment is really interesting. Like you said, like it's kind of like, high school basketball a little bit, because you could hear the chirping. I don't know if it came through in the broadcast, but man, there were some chirpers on all sides there with Pitt-LSU, and it was just the same as Wisconsin, UCF. But it was also cool because you could hear the players chirp back at them. You could hear that it was a lot more intimate, and I think it's a different kind of challenge for players to handle the pace of game. One thing Ishmael Leggett said, we had to create our own energy, because it wasn't like the zoo was there bouncing up and down. It wasn't like there was a giant crowd of LSU fans that you kind of fed off, like, I'm going to make their lives miserable. It was rather a quiet venue where there was a strong crew of Pitt fans. There were lots of "Let's Go Pitt" chants, but it's not the same as, like, when you have these ruckus environments that you often go into that they're going to face when they get into ACC play. So again, it's not it's not the aesthetics of the actual Greenbrier, but I still think the atmosphere, there's a little bit of ugly to it that I think they still got to work out as far as how the vibes are created in this tournament.
Yeah, and sometimes that's just ballroom basketball, man. It's supposed to be a
Yeah.
little bit ugly, it's supposed to be a little bit silly, and that's just this time of year, and that's just this sport. So you got to embrace it a little bit. If you want it to be all perfect, if you want it to be the cleanest basketball that you ever seen, because also, I mean, the game reflected the environment a little bit, but if you want something nicer than that, you can go watch the NBA. This is college basketball. This is part of what makes it great. So part of what makes it compelling and entertaining. So I don't know. I enjoy it, but maybe I'm just a little bit of a sicko.
What's your ugly in this game?
Yeah, my ugly was kind of something I've referenced a little bit before, and that's how Pitt kind of got bogged down in the physicality of this game. For the first time, I feel like they were really physically challenged by a team. I mean, you could tell from the jump, Cam Corrin tries to back down, the center Reed from LSU, and it just isn't working. He just isn't able to overpower him like he was some other guys. And the way the game was officiated, I didn't think it was particularly, lopsided one way or another, but the refs let some stuff go. They let a lot of contact go, and I thought at times Pitt let that get to them. They let them take that out of their flow. And like you referenced, LSU kind of dictated the terms of this game at certain points. So it wasn't particularly pretty basketball, and I think especially on Pitt's side, they let the physicality get to them. They let the pace of the game get to them, and that's something that you don't want to see happen if you're a team that's aiming to be elite and make a deep run in March and maybe be a top 25 team and push for an ACC championship or something like that. You got to be able to survive in those environments, and Pitt did eventually survive, but they showed signs of weakness at a time when I didn't think they should have. This is an older team, and they need to be able to handle physicality like that.
And I want to point out, like, look, we're saying these things. People are like, geez, did Pitt win the game? And like, yes, they did. But we're pointing out that, like, I personally think, and I think, and Steve, I want your thoughts here too. I think this Pitt team has the potential to be really good, and I think I predicted them to win 26 games this year. When we did our little preview run through the press, I still hold that. And because I think that this team can beat a lot of good teams out there. I also think there's a maturity to this team and that they're growing from it. And you and I, we've covered this basketball team for a few years now, and we've seen this program. We've seen them deal with early season adversity. I think this is the best team Jeff Capel's ever had at dealing with early season adversity. I mean, 6-0 is one thing to say about that, but like there was never like there was a question at halftime if they were going to beat LSU. By like 5 minutes in the second half, I was like, oh no, they got this. And
right.
Beating an SEC team in a neutral environment, you didn't often get that. Last year they got dog walked by Florida in that situation. So I think that when we're going over these things, we're simply saying, hey, these are the things that Pitt can clean up if they're on their way to being a true elite team in college basketball.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, they hit some adversity, but like you said, I mean, adversity in the past for them meant taking a really ugly loss early in the year. This is the type of game that a year ago or 2 years ago, Pitt loses. But because they have that kind of maturity, because they have a diversity or a versatility, I guess, on their offense, they're able to survive nights like this. So, they weren't perfect. The game wasn't particularly aesthetically pleasing, but they won anyway. They came through when it mattered most. They made clutch plays. They played good defense. And I think that is the hallmark of a good team. And that's the hallmark of a cohesive team, too. I mean, you look at teams like West Virginia and LSU, who are both kind of transfer portal heavy. Pitt is a team that seems like it has some more continuity and played that way tonight. They kind of, walked into the fire and survived it. So that's always admirable. And like you said, we're nitpicking a little bit, but that's because we got a team that's 6-0, and sometimes we've got to nitpick when we've got a team that hasn't lost yet. You gotta find something to complain about, and I'm sure Jeff Capel will find some stuff to complain about from this game as well.
He certainly will. That's what he does. That's what he does. That's what good coaches do. This one, Pitt now 6-0. They will play Wisconsin, I believe, unless something has changed.
No, they definitely will. I think they were up 20 with 3 minutes when we started recording this. So
yes, so they'll play Wisconsin, who looks like a really good basketball team. If they beat Wisconsin, maybe they're in a ranked conversation when they get ready to play Ohio State next Friday. But before we can get to that on Sunday, which will be, I believe, a 5 p.m. tip is the projected time right now. Before we get to that, Pitt football will take on Louisville. We'll have our post-game thoughts on that as well. Chris Carter, Stephen Thompson, thanks again for tuning into the Pitt post-game show here for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We'll see you again very soon here tomorrow as we recap what happens with Pitt football versus Louisville. We'll see you then. Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.